I'm going to present my literature review, which I've published earlier about gamification and its role in fostering brand value co-creation. So introducing myself, as Albert said, I'm a professional and scholar in marketing and business management. I've had 8 years of work experience across several commercial industries in the Middle East, and previously I've got a master's degree in marketing and international management, and I'm currently pursuing my PhD at Aston Business School, and my research area is investigating the role and the impact of gamification in promoting brand value co-creation. So my literature review was initially co-authored with my supervisors, Dr. Panagiotis Petridis and Dr. Rushana Husainova. Basically, we aim to cover merely empirical and peer-reviewed case studies that discusses and interpret the cases, practical cases of using gamification to promote brand value co-creation. And I'm sharing with you hereby a couple of interesting findings that we've had out of the paper. And I'm going to elaborate more indeed about each one of them in the following slides. So the first finding is that while there is an emerging evidence that there is a substantial influence of gamification in fostering brand value co-creation, gamification is found prevalently endorsing 4 major types of brand value co-creation activities that I'm going to define later on. The third finding is that most game design elements or game dynamics and mechanics that were employed across the examined case studies are of hedonic nature, whereas there are like some people or some scholars or even some practitioners who tend to assume that usually users are looking more into utilitarian values more than hedonic one. But when it comes to the literature, it looks like hedonic game design elements were much more prevalent across the case studies that we had. And finally, I'm going to share with you at the very end of my presentation some new types of co-creation activities and game design elements that are worth researching in the future. So when talking about gamification in marketing, just as mentioned earlier in the previous presentations, so it's all about how to entertain customers and how to enrich their digital experience. And at the end of the day, we're looking for customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. Whereas my paper approaches the gamification in marketing from another perspective, which is brand value co-creation. So when speaking about brand value co-creation, we're not merely intending to grab customer satisfaction or to build up customer loyalty. Companies are literally thinking much beyond that point. They are thinking how to have a mutual and reciprocal value along with their users, so that the users are happy and entertained on one hand, but the brand itself is getting, is having an added is gaining an added value out of the gamified experience that their customers are going through. So it's kind of a mutual benefit for both the company and users. I'm going to provide a couple of examples so that to make it more clear in terms of what is the difference between customer experience value co-creation and brand value co-creation. So on the very first example on the left, as you can see, that's the Starbucks application that is used by millions of people all over the world. And by partaking in this experience, users are kind of co-creating their own experience. They are earning stars after each time they buy products from Starbucks, and later on they can redeem those stars for free food or drink. As you can see, the time frame game element is also considered in this application, so that to put kind of a pressure and challenge on customers in order to make sure they use the stars they have in hand before a certain limit time, before they lose the whole thing they have in hand. Um, in this case, we're talking about gamification that is promoting customer experience value co-creation. Customers are co-creating their own experience. Whereas in the second example we have on the right, TripAdvisor is granting its users with badges such as the restaurant expert badge that you can see in orange. So this badge is dedicated for users, not because they are taking part in a gamified experience for their own sake, as it was the case in the very first example, but because they are contributing in co-creating the brand value itself. They are leveraging the quality of the brand by contributing, by providing insightful information, by helping other customers. So basically, they are playing the role of customer service employees. They are serving others by providing insightful rating and reviews and information about new destinations. So basically, they are kind of employees, informal employees in that company. So brand value co-creation, it's about a mutual benefit for customers enjoying the experience and for the brand making benefit out of this contribution. Okay, so those were like a couple of examples just to show up the difference between the two concepts, because those two concepts are kind of very similar, and there is a nuance that we have to spot out of them. So the second finding that I've shared with you earlier was that my paper revealed four types, let's say four major types of brand value co-creation activities, named customer service, insight sharing, word of mouth, and random task. So when it comes to customer service, just like the example I've shared with you earlier, TripAdvisor users are helping other users. They are providing customer service for other by providing insightful information about destinations, talking about what's going to what they have been through in specific destination, how do they rate that experience, and so on. So they are basically providing help for other users who are wondering and having a couple of inquiries about destinations. So customer service basically implies engaging users in helping each other. Okay. Usually, this is practiced by answering questions, by solving technical issues, by submitting helpful rating and reviews, such as in TripAdvisor. Another example that we can mention here is Stack Overflow, which is an IT question and answer website where users raise questions, IT questions, and in return, other users are replying to the questions, and successful answers are granted and compensated with badges. Okay. The other type of co-creation activity is insight sharing, and this basically implies engaging users in sharing insights to companies, and this is usually practiced by undertaking surveys that are released by a company, or voting on proposals, or sharing live data. Huawei is a good example to mention here. So in the gamified platform of Huawei, users get granted with points, and they unlock badges and medals when they share insightful ideas and proposals for the company to take into consideration. Word of mouth is the third type of brand value co-creation activities. And it implies engaging users in promoting a brand or any of its products or services, usually through social media networks. So usually this is undertaken by sharing and forwarding brand-related contents on social media, or even inviting friends to join the online community. Xiaomi, the Chinese telecommunication company, has got a really interesting gamified environment where people earn points and unlock badges and medals when they do lots of contributions. And one of these contributions is to share product links with their friends and with other people on social media. And finally, random task is the fourth type of brand value co-creation. it typically implies anything beyond what have been mentioned earlier. So out of the literature review that I've been through, it looks like most of the companies employing gamification to foster random task activities are crowdsourcing companies and sharing economic companies. So those two type of industries, crowdsourcing and sharing economy, are basically using gamification, to promote on-demand projects and trading activities. ZBG is a good example. This is a task crowdsourcing Chinese company. It is one of the biggest crowdsourcing companies in China, and people there earn points and get constructive feedback, usually motivational feedback, so that they keep on doing the projects that they are pursuing in this website. Okay, so reverting to the game design elements that have been predominantly used across the case studies that were covered in my paper, and I think this is something I'm glad I've shared in this slide, because in the previous presentations, this was one of the questions about raising about what are the game dynamics or mechanics that should be usually used, and how do we know that those are the main prevalent or the main attracting elements to be employed? Well, out of my paper, I'm making out, as you can see, the game dynamics and the compatible game mechanics that were pursued in the case studies that I've covered. So as you can see, the very first game dynamic that was employed across the 33 empirical studies was intangible rewards, usually reflected by points and badges and medals. Social interaction comes in the second stage, and it is usually employed through interactive threads that put people together so that they discuss uh, mutually interesting topics. Competition comes on the third place, and it is usually employed through leaderboards and ranking tables. Then tangible rewards, usually implying payback points and discount vouchers. And then motivation stimulus, undertaken through motivating notifications. Then comes challenge with progress bars and time challenge, like time frame and time challenging deadlines. Customization, usually employed through avatars. Aestheticism, usually through visual design, narrative, and storylines. Then at the very end comes cooperation, employed through collaborative tasks, and fantasy, uh, which is endorsed by augmented reality, virtual reality, and all stuff of very very advanced technologies. However, out of the case studies that I've covered, only one example was employing this dynamic. So, referring to the very last point that I've mentioned, although it has been only used in just one case study out of the 33 empirical studies that I have covered in my paper, yet fantasy, usually undertaking through augmented reality or virtual reality stuff and all types of advanced technologies, is very promising, because by doing so we are kind of uh, taking our customers in a very exciting and kind of something very new, very new experience, out of which they can come out with new ideas, with new projects, with new proposals. And I believe that out of the study, although we're talking just about one empirical study, but it was really promising and shows how this game dynamic is really promising. The other type of the other two research directions that I believe are worth pursuing in the future are the fact of considering using gamification to endorse two additional types of brand value co-creation activities. The first one is CSR related activities, whereby companies could employ gamification to encourage and motivate their customers to undertake CSR related activities. It shouldn't necessarily be referring to financially supporting like cases, social cases, or charities, but also, people can earn points or badges the more they propose new, intriguing social cases or charities to support, or even, voting on cases and proposals. So gamification could be really used to support CSR related activities, and this hasn't been really like taken into consideration throughout the case studies that I've been through. And finally, gamification could also be used in a further co-creation activity, which is physical commercial operations. So I have one example in mind that I could share here, so that like this example would be clearer. So GiveGov, the UK mobile network operator, once at a time, they developed a program called Mystery Shopper, and people were invited to go into Tesco stores and to check how the GiveGov SIM stands are displayed, and take photos and share it back with the company. And by doing so, they get compensated with payback points. So here we're not talking just about online sort of contributions, such as customer service, answering other questions, forwarding or sharing contents, sharing insights with the company. We're talking about something physical, whereby customers, they just go to the ground and undertake physical things for the sake of gaining payback points, badges, and so on. So gamification could go much beyond the point of engaging people from their own homes. So those are the main promising like research directions that I believe future studies should take into consideration. So yeah, that was like a brief overview of my literature review paper, and I would be really glad if anyone has any questions so that I can answer it.
Cool. Brilliant. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
Amir. I'll sort of start off with some of the questions that's coming through. I'll first show up one of the things from Pete, which I think definitely sort of accentuates what you said. So the win-win mutual benefit between customer and the brand, which I'm a great believer of, sort of making sure they align perfectly.
Exactly.
I think proper question from the Gamification Europe account in general. Do you know if they managed to cover all relevant Tesco stores, or had lots of people reporting on the same stores with the GiveGaf mystery shop?
So I think when it comes to filtering the outcome, I think that was the task of the administration staff in GiveGov. But as far as I remember, people were requested to check the Tesco's that are nearby. The ones that are very close to the places. So that by doing so, they are covering the widest number of points possible in the kingdom.
Okay, brilliant. Well, if any more questions come through, please put them up. I have a few sort of going through here. So you mentioned in the start, in terms of with like the Starbucks example and the TripAdvisor thing, I did have a sort of idea of, in terms of like, what's your thoughts on with that sort of co-creation and that value exchange, in terms of how people are gaining value in their activities, and then obviously there's a level of attrition that they're losing these points. I mean, how does that? How do you sort of? What are your thoughts in terms of like that experience of value creation and co-creation and all of that when there's attrition involved?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and doing my research nowadays, I'm really keen to know what are the setbacks of gamification in a way. So I'm not really merely like content with whatever I have in hand in terms of how gamification is working well, but also I'm like pursuing investigations to see how gamification could be counterproductive in a way, and how it might like take customers through negative experiences in a way. So this is one of the things that I'm like investigating right now to see, well, are all the game dynamics employed really fruitful, really beneficial, really working well, or they could be counterproductive. One of them is just as the one you said, the time frame and putting pressure on people. So from a gamification perspective, this is perceived as a challenging, game design element, which is theoretically intended to be motivational. But maybe when it comes to practice, maybe it could be really counterproductive. So this is one of the setbacks, let's say, between quotation that I'm aiming to investigate.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so so it taps onto the point that Salma was making earlier in the day in terms of how the emotions work, in terms of what usually focused on the positive emotions, but obviously there are also negative emotions that come into
Exactly,
play with
yeah.
these
Exactly.
various things.
That's gamification is a paradox. Yeah, it's very subtle. You have to know how to promote it in a way that you don't lose your customer. Yeah. So it's kind of very sensitive.
Yeah, very fine line that you need to
Yeah.
balance there. No, still waiting for others, but I obviously have a few more questions still. One of the you had your ranking slide on there in
Yeah.
terms of how what sort of showed up the most and what people that yeah, exactly that one there. And I noticed with you have obviously with the second one is the social interaction, and you were discussing other points in terms of that. And obviously you have this
Yeah.
the whole co-creation concept. I mean, wanted to sort of explore the thoughts in terms of that community engagement that then promotes that brand with some of the points that you had, like the word of mouth and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Like, so your thoughts in terms of like, leveraging that community, is that something that sort of, do you need that community there? Can you do that while creating a community and that sort of whole social interaction
Yeah. So
concept in terms of co-creation?
exactly. So out of the case studies that I've covered, I believe more than maybe 80% of them are based on a gamified community. So we're talking about the whole environment where people are put all together. That's why social interaction is the second most used game dynamic out of those studies. So yeah, it's all about interacting. It's all about putting people together and discussing mutually interesting topics. And it's not just hedonic. It's also a room for them to create, to build up networking, to have like some good audience if they are targeting a specific segment in the market and so on. So yeah, social interaction is very intriguing indeed.
We have a question come through from Victoria. She appreciates the ranking slide.
Yeah.
Do you think that this ranking also has to do with the complexity or ease of their implementation?
Well, I don't think so because we're not talking about small enterprises or even medium enterprises who would, think about the budget and how to employ game design elements. We're talking most of the studies I have covered were about, like big companies who are affording, like employing very sophisticated and complicated gamified systems. Uh, and I think as long as we're still talking about gamification and not serious games, things are still very conventional and adaptable in a way. It's applicable for everyone to do it in terms of companies. So I don't think it's about complication uh, as as much as it's about what it looks like, what people are looking for. That's what I can assume out of this study. It looks like people are looking for intangible rewards that satisfies them and recognize their efforts, social interaction that put them together with peer, users or customers so that they can build up good relationships and good networking. Competition, I believe, is one of the very interesting game elements because it's not just about the fun; it's about self-esteem. It's about showing off in a way that you're there and you can compete and you can win. It's all about winning. When you win, that's one of the like game dynamics that I believe most of people in nature would look for.
Definitely,
And the surprising outcome is that tangible rewards, which we used to believe that most of people would like mainly look for, such as gaining something practical, like payback points or discount vouchers or gifts, is ranked as the foremost like used game dynamic. Yet I believe that this is something that I need to investigate more when it comes to uh, people who are not really engaged in gamification. So I was just talking to some colleagues earlier in the break room, and I was telling them that out of my studies, all of the case studies were merely focusing on people who are really interacting with the gamification system. But what about the silent army, as I call it, which are the lurkers? And I believe they represent more than 90% maybe of online communities. And I assume, and this is what I'm going to investigate throughout my research, that if tangible rewards were like kind of emphasized more throughout gamification, I believe that a significant segment of those lurkers would come in and would engage and contribute into brand value co-creation.
Definitely. I'll certainly look forward to seeing that research in the future and what comes out of that. I think no more other questions coming through, and with that, I thank you very much, Amir, for
Thank you very much.
sharing your published paper here and taking us through
Thanks a lot.
all the interesting aspects of it.